America is prepared to stand with you in pursuit of shared interests and common security. But the nations of the Middle East cannot wait for American power to crush this enemy for them.
That was President Trump this morning in Saudi Arabia, where he spoke directly to the Muslim world, encouraging their leaders to bolster their role in the fight against terrorism. Will the message work? Let's talk to our panel. We have with us former Republican presidential candidate Rick Santorum, Farah Pandith, the former State Department representative to the Muslim world, Bakari Sellers, a Democrat and former South Carolina state representative, and Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger of the great state of Illinois in the Foreign Affairs Committee. Thanks, one and all, for being here. Farah, let me just ask you, now that the speech has been given, what is the reception like in the Middle East?
So I think there are two key takeaways from the speech. One, which is really powerful, the president talked about the ideas that underlie extremism. I think it's really important he put that out there. He also said, I'll do what it takes to make this happen, to defeat ISIS and the ideology. That's really powerful. The other key takeaway is that he spoke to the people in that room. He was speaking to the 50 Muslim-majority nations in that room. He was not speaking to Muslims around the world. Everything that he said he wanted to do was good, but it was from the top down. He wasn't asking for change from the bottom up. And in order to fight the ideology, you have to get the people in the communities to actually work with you. So there's a disconnect there in terms of the premise of what he said and how he's actually going to do things.
Although I would argue it's not a disconnect, because I think a lot of the leaders are fomenting a lot of the problems that we're having. I mean, we talked earlier about Saudi Arabia. I mean, speaking to the Saudis about having more liberalization within their country, not promoting radical forms of Islam. And those are, I think, to me, those were positive. This speech was better than I thought it was going to be, from all the hype that this was going to be more of a conciliatory speech and a very big change. He did have some very strong lines, particularly at the end of the speech, that I thought was good. But it was balanced. I mean, I would have given a tougher speech. I was hoping for a tougher speech, but I thought it was a very balanced speech, and I was overall pleased.
And there have been some disputes within Trump world about the speech. Let me put up a tweet from Roger Stone, one of President Trump's confidants. He was not happy with the stagecraft of the trip. He writes, candidly, this is the picture of the president getting an award from the King of Saudi Arabia. Candidly, this makes me want to puke. And then it says hashtag Jared's idea. Really, probably, honestly, the trip having at least more to do, I think, at least equal parts to do with H.R. McMaster, the president's national security advisor, as Jared Kushner, but he definitely played a role. But that is some serious shade thrown at Jared.
Oh, yeah. Well, look, this is, I think, Roger Stone's attempt to try to be relevant and make it in the news cycle. I don't think anybody really takes him seriously. I don't, at least. I see that. I mean, how are you going to get an award from the king? Does he have to actually then stand on a crate so that you don't have to bow and he can lower down upon you?
The president is 6'3" or 6'4", yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's silly. But, I think the great thing, by the way, about what's going on in Saudi Arabia largely, I was very frustrated during the presidential campaign when we talked about how to defeat ISIS, and you had, for instance, Ted Cruz say, I'll just carpet bomb them till the sand glows. The reality is now this is, I think, a recognition of the fact that, yes, there is a military component to defeating terrorism, but there is a component of this is not going to be defeated by the United States of America. It'll be defeated by the Muslim world rejecting the ideology of extremism. And it'll be defeated by taking that next generation of kids, the 7- and 8-year-olds, giving them education, giving them opportunity, and they can reject the recruits from ISIS that come into their camps and say, come on.
I actually agree with that point. And one of the things that we talked about throughout the campaign trail and some of the rhetoric of Donald Trump, because I don't think you can look at this speech in a vacuum. Many people who saw this speech and compared it to the 2009 speech of Barack Obama saw a lot of similarities. You can even go back to George Bush, and you saw a lot of similarities in the tone and the language that was used. But you can't look at this speech in a vacuum from who Donald Trump really is and what he said along the campaign trail. Is the person we saw today someone who wants the Muslim world to help us fight ISIS and combat terror? Is that the president who is going to be leading from this point forward? Or is it the one who on the campaign trail said that Islam hates us, who is a proponent of the Muslim ban? And so I think that if we are going to have a conversation about Donald Trump and his future foreign policy going forward, we cannot just look at this speech in isolation. We have to look at the totality of everything that he said.
And let's go back to 2016 when President Trump was very critical of Hillary Clinton for the Clinton Foundation raising money from Saudi Arabia. He wrote on Facebook, Saudi Arabia and many of the countries that gave vast amounts of money to the Clinton Foundation want women as slaves and to kill gays. Hillary must return all money from such countries. But today in the Wall Street Journal, we learn the World Bank plans to announce Sunday at an event with Ivanka Trump that Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates have pledged $100 million collectively towards a fund for women who own or want to start businesses. Obviously, the Clinton Foundation and this World Bank Fund are different entities, but the money is the same, Senator.
Well, look, I mean, having a fund to promote women, I mean, I think that's a positive.
Sure, absolutely.
But your hypocrisy is a joke right now, because what happens is the Clinton Foundation literally had programs that helped women around the country.
I understand.
And they took
around the world.
Around the world, excuse me. And they took $25 million from Saudi Arabia, I believe, in the UAE. Here you have $100 million. Imagine Brian Fallon announcing $100 million to the president's senior advisor, who happened to be Chelsea Clinton. You would have a fit.
Let Senator Santorum answer the question.
No, look, I agree that the double standard is there. I'm not arguing that, and it is what it is. I like the fact that the president went to Saudi Arabia. I like the fact that the president stood up there and laid out, very much laid in his speech, what the changes that need to happen to create more opportunity for women and for minorities, for other faiths. I mean, he laid that out very, very clearly, and that to me, that's a positive thing. Could he and should he have been tougher? Yes, but he wasn't, and I'll take what I can get.
The speech was very measured. It was very careful. He says things like, "We are going to fight the financing," and everybody can applaud with that. But how are you going to follow that up? Is he going to look directly at Saudi Arabia and say, "Stop funding mosques around the world. Stop bringing textbooks around the world"?
So.
He talks about culture. It was a really special part of the speech where he tips his hat to the cultural and the historic piece of the world that we're looking at. Yet he doesn't say anything about Saudis destroying cultural heritage sites around the world. So there was a mismatch there. Indeed, there's one other thing that I think is really important. He gave the statistic, 62% or 65% of the Arab world, he said, was under the age of 30. Yet he didn't look into the audience and say, "What are you doing with your youth? And here's what I'm going to do." When you're talking about fighting extremism and his words about wanting to do as much as he can, there were no deliverables in that speech about how he's going to do it.
Congressman?
You have 33 minutes that he is standing in front of dozens of Arab leaders talking, his first major speech to this world. I can point out 1,000 things I wish were in the speech, but the speech would have been 4 hours long then. I think what the president did was say, look, we have to destroy radical terrorism. We have to unite. I think behind the scenes is the appropriate time to be very effective and say, look, the Crown Prince is trying some serious reforms right now in Saudi Arabia. This is a very tough culture to move. It's not like they can just institute reforms and not expect there to be some consternation. So they're in a measured going forward approach, but I think behind the scenes is when you make the strong case. When you're in front of 50 leaders is not the time to point out Saudi Arabia, but it's a time to unite folks together.
We're going to take a very quick break, and then I'll come back to you.